Good morning and welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Marissa Cherry and I'm a Senior Marketing Manager for Adobe's Public Sector team. Today's webinar entitled Transform Your Digital Communications with Tablet Publishing is a 60-minute session and it will be recorded. In the next day or so, you're going to be receiving a link with an email to this recording as well as some links to some additional DPS training. For those of you joining us on the telephone, your microphones have been muted, but you can also listen to this webinar via audio on your computer. And to view this presentation, please click the full screen button at the top right of the main pod. Today, we have a couple people joining us. Behind the scenes, we have DPS Senior Technical Writer, Bob Bringhurst, and Connect Specialist, Trevor Whitney. So if you have any questions during the presentation, either technical or product related, please put them in the chat pod on the left-hand side of the screen, and one of them will do the best to answer your questions. We'll also be taking questions that Jerry will be answering at the end of the session over the speakers. So with all of that housekeeping behind us, I would like to turn it over to Jerry Silverman. Jerry is a Senior Solutions Consultant with Adobe for over 15 years. He has experience producing applications for corporate, broadcast, retail, and e-learning. He's currently an evangelist and instructor of Adobe's desktop tools, and he definitely enjoys sharing his expertise and passion with all of you in the public sector across North America. So with that, I will turn it over to Jerry Silverman, and thank you again for your time today. We appreciate you joining us.
Thank you, Marissa. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. And so I'm sure I have met many of you. I recognize the names on the invitation, but this is me, Jerry Silverman, Senior Solutions Consultant for Adobe. I'm really grateful to have your attention today, and I'm joined, as Marissa said, by a couple of great technical assistants, Bob Bringhurst and Trevor Whitney. So today's going to be a really fun day. We're going to move really quickly. I'm just showing you right now what our outline is going to be for the next hour. We're going to do a little welcome, and I'd like to learn a little bit about you. So I'm going to bring up a few poll questions, and then we're going to talk about the publishing landscape and how that's changed over the last years. And then we're going to go into kind of a review of the digital publishing suite that is Adobe's core offering for tablet publications. We're going to take some time kind of towards the end to go over some resources, just because these are the things that many of our customers ask about. Where can I get more information? Where can I do it myself? Kind of self-serve stuff. And where can I find training and other things like that. And then we'll take some time to do some Q&A for the questions down there in the chat pod on the left-hand side of your screen. Now, if you have a question in line, feel free to type it in there, and Bob and or Trevor will help to answer. But if there are some kind of standout questions that we want to make sure that we answer, we'll do it then. And then I'll stick around for a few moments afterwards in the chat pod to help answer questions. But before we actually get started, I just wanted to learn a little bit more about you. It looks like we've got about 71 folks on the line today. So if you wouldn't mind just letting us know a little bit more so that we can tailor this presentation. Up in the upper left-hand side, if you wouldn't mind just checking the job description that closely matches yours. We know, through the registration numbers that we saw many of these types of jobs titles. So, just want to know who's on the line. I'd love to know which version of Creative Suite tools your agency currently uses. Not what you're planning to use or what you've bought, but what you as end users actually have installed and running on your system. That's going to be probably the most helpful for us. And I'd like to know specifically as we get started, if anybody who's on the line right now, it looks like we've got 75 attendees, how familiar you currently are with Adobe Digital Publishing Suite. For some people, it looks like this is going to be a very beginning session. It looks like for another few people, they've used it intermittently. Some have seen it but never actually used it, and we actually have a few pros in here. So for the pros, feel free to pitch those hard balls into the Q&A pod, and you can try and stump Bob since he writes all of the technical documentation for the product. And also, if you want to just give us an idea of what you'd like to know most today in terms of how digital publishing has changed over the years, what exactly the digital publishing suite is, if you want to know about government use cases and also resources. So I'll give another second or two to wrap these up. But it looks like we've got a fairly broad distribution of job titles. Looks like, wow, almost over half of the attendees are already upgraded to CS6, so that's great. Looks like the majority of attendees have not seen DPS, and it looks like we've got a pretty even spread around government use cases and just a general overview. So thank you for taking the time to fill that out. I'm going to go ahead back over now and close those polls up and just take us through a couple minutes to talk about how the world of publishing has changed over the last years. And let me find my clicker, and we should be good to go. And I'm not going to share my webcam the entire time, but I'll give you a nice picture of me there. Hopefully that's not too creepy. So we have all seen at Adobe and in and around all different industries, government and otherwise, huge changes in how people are creating and consuming content. And that's affecting the entire publishing ecosystem. It started in the 90s with a shift to desktop and the internet, and since then it's grown to be internet anywhere on any device. And beyond that, we're seeing social media as one of the key drivers of this shift, which is further democratizing the creation of content and the publishing of content. But at the same time, it's created a very fractured media consumption landscape. So it's very difficult for many of the government agencies that we talk to know where to best invest their shrinking budget dollars to reach all of their constituents, to reach their internal stakeholders, and to reach across the aisle to other government agencies. So there's no question that tablet devices are expected to grow quite rapidly over the next several years. And according to Forrester research, on average, people are spending 79 minutes per day using tablet apps, of which they typically download about 9 per month. And the forecast is that this number is only going to grow, that by the year 2014, there will be 400 million tablets in the global marketplace. And mobile browsing will equal desktop browsing, as it already does in some parts of the world. I know in my household it certainly does. One item of particular note is that because of this fragmented device market across Apple's iOS, Google's Android tablet, and the Amazon Kindle Fire and some of those other tablets that are emerging, it's a huge challenge to address each individual form factor, screen resolution, screen size in a cost-efficient manner by using custom development. So before we take another step further, just wanted to examine a little bit about the common demographics of tablet users. And this is from a recent study by the Online Publishers Association in a study that they put out called A Portrait of Today's Tablet User from June of this year. So although you as government agencies have a lot more insight into the demographics of your own constituents and your own content users, this data that we're showing can kind of be useful to overlay onto your data to gain a little bit of insight about how tablets can accelerate your digital publishing business. So the same study that I referenced on the previous slide actually notes that tablet users tend to be more affluent than the average U.S. household, but I would say that even that statistic is going to shift in the near future as competitive market forces continue to push tablet prices further downward. And we're actually seeing smartphone usage in the $35,000 and less U.S. household to be a 1 in 3 percentage. So as, like I said, as the competitive market forces push tablet prices downward, it's not going to be an executive toy or kind of a privileged toy anymore. So additionally, in that study, it shows that tablet users on average spend almost 14 hours a week with their device. So this is clearly signaling that these users are engaging with this communication channel in significant amounts and for significant amounts of time. And this breakdown by time segment here is very elucidating. Now, when we talk about actually inside of government agencies, we found in our polling and also across some of our government statistics sources that tablet and smartphone usage inside government agencies has obviously spiked, and it's predicted that half of government agencies will have a smartphone policy in place by 2013, and a fifth of them will have a tablet policy or be using tablets actively in their business. And over half of those agencies are using or assessing the use of mobile apps. And this is from going across state and local, defense, and also federal civilian agencies, that half of them have a bring your own device to work policy, or use your own device for, for work purposes or government purposes. So we are seeing an uptick at work in the government right now. So what I figured I would do now is just give a quick overview of what exactly the digital publishing suite is, because what we want to do at Adobe is help you move the valuable content that you have in your domain as knowledge experts out onto these tablet devices. And DPS basically has two primary components, and Creative Suite on the desktop is definitely where it starts. So designers can leverage what they already know about print publishing to produce rich interactive publications using tools that they already know and love and have been working with for years. So you can create applications without doing any coding, or you can extend your DPS app with HTML5. The Digital Publishing Suite also includes a number of cloud-based services that allow you to bundle up your application, get it ready for distribution using a variety of different methods. So using our online tools, you can produce issues of your publications, which are known as folios. You can distribute those worldwide. You can view those publications across a variety of platforms, and you can analyze the usage of those publications by your tablet and smartphone constituents. So DPS really is an enterprise-grade solution, and when I say enterprise-grade, we have a tremendous number of engineers and dedicated resources who work on the stability, the performance, the compatibility of this product and of all the publications created with this product on a minute-by-minute basis. So it really is backed by the global resources of Adobe. And as such, with such a rapidly changing digital landscape and the market for devices ever changing, we aggressively release new features to the Digital Publishing Suite to keep up with that market demand. And 6 to 8 weeks has been the traditional release cycle, and we're actually changing that release cycle to be a little bit kind of less aggressive, but it's still going to be a fairly frequently updated product to address how the market continues to shift. That being said, with all of the changes, we have seen tremendous growth in this service over the last 2 years. And since we announced it in 2010, we've had 4,500 apps published across app marketplaces worldwide. So there's really a lot of them to talk about. And not only are these apps that are created with the Digital Publishing Suite proliferating, but users really are consuming the content. In the last year, we've had over 35 million issues downloaded by DPS applications. And as of July 2012, this was a rate of 135 to 150,000 issues delivered by Adobe's content delivery network per day, and it continues to steadily grow. So probably some of the largest publishers in the world and some of the most prestigious magazine and periodical titles, such as Wired, The New Yorker, Vanity Fair, Martha Stewart Living, Reader's Digest, and also the now digital-only Newsweek magazine. Not sure if you saw that announcement, but they're ceasing all print publications over there at Newsweek. All of those publications rely on Adobe's DPS to deliver digital content to their subscribers, so much so that 6 out of 7 magazine publications on the iTunes App Store are DPS publications. So not only does DPS have traction among the magazine publishers, but major commercial and corporate brands like Mercedes-Benz, EMI Music, Deloitte, go down the list, they are seeing tablet publications as a way to engage their customers in highly designed, interactive, rich, immersive formats. And so Adobe currently has over 3,000 commercial customers of DPS, and more importantly, government customers like NASA, Smithsonian, Australian Department of Industry and Innovation, Canada Mortgage and Housing, many others are also using DPS. So I wanted to look at a few pertinent examples of this right now. Probably the first and most visible one is Defense Media Activity, which is kind of like the Condé Nast, or the publishing arm of the Department of Defense. They have probably over 1 million subscribers worldwide to all of their flagship publications like Marine Corps Magazine, Airman Magazine for the Air Force, Soldiers Magazine, etc. And they received a directive in 2010 that the $4 million budget for printing their publication was going away, and they still had the mission to put their magazine out there. They wanted to provide that rich, immersive experience, but they didn't want to retrain all of their designers to become Objective-C developers or HTML5 developers, not in 2010 anyway, when there weren't really tools and HTML5 was such a question mark. So they were concerned about retraining, and they also wanted to prove if they were going to spend time on a digital edition, they needed analytics to report on how that initiative was succeeding. And so they were kind of a flagship starter with the Digital Publishing Suite back in October 2010. And as you can see here, they have really customized their implementation of the Digital Publishing Suite application quite well. They have a custom storefront, which you see a screenshot of here, offering a custom library view to download all of the different issues of their magazine. And if you go to the Adobe TV website right now, go on your iPad or go on an open web browser, just type in tv.adobe.com and flip through there. We actually have a great video case study that we put together about Marines Magazine and Defense Media Activity called The Guts to Go Digital. And it's a real quick 4-minute video that highlights how they decided to make that leap. And it's very inspiring to see kind of their thought process. So I wanted to encourage you to check that out. And not to be outdone, Airman Magazine, which is also a defense media property, just recently in the last month launched their flagship magazine into the DPS, into the iTunes App Store using the Digital Publishing Suite. But we've also seen not just these kind of highly designed magazines, but defense and energy contractors like Raytheon driving brand awareness and creating marketing and sales materials for their sales representatives and trade show attendees, and also creating investor relations and reporting documents. So our good friends at SAIC are using the Digital Publishing Suite for a number of different internal initiatives as well as outward-facing documentation. And our other good buddies at Sandia, I'm not sure if anyone from there is on the call here, but they're also using the Digital Publishing Suite, in their publication strategy as well. I don't know about you, I'm a huge fan of the Smithsonian. My kids talk about the Smithsonian museums all the time. And so Smithsonian Magazine went to DPS from a Quark-based workflow, and they're extremely high circulation, 2 million subscribers to their magazine. And if you haven't been to the iTunes App Store to download the Smithsonian Magazine, it really is quite a beautiful aesthetic experience. And again, they have such a high volume of digital subscribers that for them, working with Adobe Digital Publishing Suite was a no-brainer. This was one that I found interesting. The Department of Homeland Security's Immigration and Customs Enforcement is using DPS for on-site installation kiosks for public outreach and communication. So they put together informational videos, slideshows, and text in an iPad-based kiosk in the lobby for their ICE office in D.C., and that allows visitors to the office to learn more about their mission and their history, and really engaging application and cool stuff. But even more than DHS, we've seen civilian agencies across the United States and Canada. For example, this is the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, put together their quarterly and annual reports, research publications, and also recruiting and public constituent education. So for example, the Australian Government Department of Industry and Innovation has a recruiting app that they released to get young people out of college to join the government. And so that's a very engaging application. And then, of course, NASA has a few great science publications, one of which they haven't quite released yet. They shared an early view of it with Adobe. And it's a cooperation between NASA and the U.S. The USGS Geological Survey, and they are basically taking high-resolution satellite imagery that's collected by USGS and NASA together, and kind of aesthetically putting them into a very beautiful, appealing application called Earth as Art, and that's going to be coming out soon on the iTunes App Store. Very aesthetically nice, and also, yeah, just a great experience. In the state and local market, we've seen tourism and promotional materials come out from almost all of the major cities across the United States. Probably the most compelling one I've seen is the Portland Guide, which, again, that's also a free download. They really use the interactivity quite well, but the city of Portland doesn't actually buy the license. They actually, kind of buy the product from a boutique contractor who builds the applications for them. So before we actually get into the basics, I'm just going to pause and see if there are any questions in the chat pod. Let me see. What do the Gov usage stats compare with international orgs and corporations? I'm not sure who asked that question, but over there in the chat pod. But I would say, those international orgs and corporations, they have different sets of considerations. So the large publishers, obviously, when they have millions of consumers to fulfill, that's different than in government where the audience is a little bit more focused. So we don't have hard statistics that we can put against their usage right now. But I would say in government, it's still it still remains to be seen how that volume is going to compare with the commercial marketplace. But thanks for that question. And Bob, if you see any other questions in the chat pod, feel free to shoot them my way. So let's just get started with the basics. I think we're doing pretty good on time. The basics of the Digital Publishing Suite boils down to what type of viewer app do you want to create? Do you want to create a Single Folio app, which is, you just launch it and all of your content is right there? Do you want to create a multi-folio app with kind of a standard default-looking storefront like the one that you see here? Or do you want to create a multi-folio app with a branded storefront like the one that I showed that is done, that Marines Magazine uses? So let's try, and there we go. There's my pointer. So let's just keep going. So here's a little bit more of an elucidation around what the difference is between a single folio app and a multi-folio app. And you're probably asking, well, what is a folio exactly? And you have to think of a folio as any type of document that would be like a magazine, or the County of San Diego has a judicial brief or an annual report, or anything that is kind of an encapsulated document by itself. So you can create an app that is just that document and that will launch off of the iTunes. It will launch right off of iOS when you tap the button, and you'll just get that document. Or when you tap to launch, you'll get a library with a bunch of different folio offerings inside of it. So again, this is just another way of illustrating. The Single Folio app just contains one folio, as opposed to a multi-folio app will have a storefront. And whether that storefront is custom or kind of the default standard storefront, it's going to contain multiple folios. And folios can kind of be broken down by their articles, right? So just as in a standard document or a magazine, you'd have sections or articles, this is where you, as the content creator, can actually make a choice about how you'd like the document to be structured. So each folio can be thought of as a publication or issue that has separate articles inside of it. So to illustrate exactly how this would work on an iPad or on a tablet device, I'm just showing you the standard storefront view of the Marines Magazine publication. So each one of these thumbnails is considered a folio, right? So they have created, in this view of the library, there are 8 folios in here. And if I were to click the archive button, that would remove that folio from my disk cache on the tablet device. But if I click view, I'll be able to actually view the publication. So that's what I do. So when I click to view that one folio, so here's the splash screen of the folio. It's actually quite nicely animated using HTML5 animation created with Adobe Edge Animate, which is a new HTML5 animation tool that some of you may have used in the past. That's what Marines is using to create the animations for their front page. But when I tap once onto that cover, what I'll get is kind of this nice Chrome or nice user interface, which allows me a bunch of different ways to navigate the folio and get from article to article. So the home button will take me back to the library or the storefront. The back button will just take me to the previous article that I was in. We have a table of contents. Not seeing any imagery. Okay. Well, yeah, give it a second, and I'm seeing it over here on my client, so hopefully we'll be all right. If you want to create a favorite, then you can, if you find any article that you'd like to keep as a bookmark, you can do that. If you'd like to share any article inside of this folio socially via Facebook or Twitter or email, or just copy the link, you can do that. Or if you want to kind of browse between all of the articles, do that here. There's also a little scrubber down at the bottom, which will allow you to scrub through the document very easily. And of course, here is where you can access all of the different storefronts right there. So if I wanted to kind of browse through the document, I would click this browse button on the upper right-hand side. And as you can see, it gives me kind of this exploded view that shows me all the different articles in my publication. And then here's some specific metadata that goes along with that article, telling me what the article name is. So this right here is the cover. And as I continue going and I can kind of swipe through, you'll see that each separate article inside of my folio has its own metadata. So there's section title metadata and the actual article title metadata, and there is a little kicker right there. And so if I were to tap on that, immediately it would bring that article up front and center. As you can see, this is, we've got a little call out to swipe the image for a 360 view of the tank. So as I grab it and drag it across, it will actually give me an image sequence. So as I drag this way, it'll give me another image sequence. It's much better to see it in the application, so I definitely recommend going and downloading this free application. So that's a 360-degree view that is touch sensitive. And if I come up on the left-hand side, if I don't want to go through this folio using the browse view or the exploded view, I also have kind of a traditional table of contents over here on the left-hand side that'll let me browse through it. If I really like this tank and I want to set it as a bookmark or as a favorite to come back to, I can do that right here very easily. If I rode in one of these tanks, if I'm a veteran who actually used one of these tanks in combat, and I wanted to share this with all my friends on Facebook, I've got a social sharing feature right here where I can just say, hey, hey guys on Facebook, notice that this sharing pane is right within the user interface of the app, and I could just share that right out. Or if I wanted to share it on Twitter, that would post directly to my Twitter feed. And then down here, if I got tired of navigating through the table of contents or the browse, I could just use the scrub bar, and I get this nice kind of preview right here of where I'm scrubbing through the magazine, what I'm going to get when I lift up my finger and release. So if I lifted up my finger here, I would get to this article right here. So again, the interactivity, the engagement, the simplicity of this solution is what I think really attracts people to it as a platform and as a content creation and distribution and consumption medium. Just it's so appealing to be able to have pan and zoom or image sequences or kind of complex slideshows or even HTML5 based capabilities and video inside of your publication. And it's something that there isn't really quite a good parallel to anywhere else out in the publishing world right now. So Bob seems to be doing a great job answering the questions in here. So I'm just going to let him run with it. Thank you, Bob. Is there anything, Bob, if you're on the phone, is there anything that you've seen that is of interest in the chat pod right now?
Yeah, there's a question that I was in the middle of answering. It's about Section 8 and accessibility. I was wondering if you could talk about that.
Sure. So Section 508, the Americans with Disabilities Act, that is, and I'm sure the folks on the phone are quite familiar with this. That is, the law that states that any digital publication or anything that is digitally available to the general public has to be accessible to screen readers or assistive devices for those who need them, who are disabled. And so the digital publishing suite is currently, the team is currently working on making an accessible DPS reader. And we expect to have that sometime within the 2013 timeframe. But the exact date as to when that will be implemented is still unannounced at this point. And like I said, we have at the very beginning 120 full-time core engineers and people on the product team who are working on this product to make it stable, to make it performant, to make it compatible with all of these new devices. And so they know up at the highest levels of that team the importance of 508 accessibility to government customers. They also know of Adobe's mission to make all of their tools as 508 compliant as possible, and the publications that are created with Adobe's tools 508 compliant. So up at the very, I will tell you that up at the very highest levels of the DPS product team, they are aware of this need and this pressing concern for government customers. And so I would say stay tuned throughout the coming year as to what Adobe's announcements will be about that. But unfortunately, there's not a specific time frame that I can give to it within the next year, just because of the engineering priorities don't make it all the way down to me. So that being said, thank you for that question. I knew that would come up. There are actually ways to make your Folio 508 accessible, and that's by using HTML stacks. And that's a method that we're not actually going to get into in this particular demo right now or in this presentation. But there is a way, and by way of example, I could point you to the New Yorker. And the New Yorker is a Condé Nast publication that you can download their app free on the iTunes App Store. And they use the HTML stacks method to load HTML into each one of their weekly folios that they deliver to their customers. And I'm actually a subscriber and get their folios. So when you go into a New Yorker publication, which is made almost entirely of HTML, that HTML is parsable by the VoiceOver utility on iTunes. I'm sorry, on iOS. So using HTML stacks, that's kind of a workaround. But the methods that we're going to be talking about on this webinar do not utilize HTML stacks, and that's something that you can actually do a little bit more research on in the free training that we're going to be offering after this webinar, and also through some of the other resources that I'll list as well. But thank you for that question. I was actually hoping to get it more towards the end, but thank you for that. So let's go ahead and keep going on the architecture, because this is also of a lot of interest to many of our government customers, exactly how it works. As I mentioned at the beginning, InDesign is kind of the front end where you would create your horizontal and vertical layouts and package them up into a folio file. And if we're just going to start from the left and go to the right here, so I'm actually just going to mute this out here. So inside of InDesign, you've got a couple of panels, the Folio Builder and Folio Overlay panels, that help to take those horizontal and vertical layouts and transform the objects and the images into interactive overlays and then package them up into a folio. You can also optimize your content there to the appropriate resolution depending on which device you happen to be targeting. Now, coming over from the Folio Builder panel, typically what you'll do is then take those folios that you've built in InDesign and upload them to the Folio Producer service. And that is going to convert and house those active folios for review and for adding metadata and to kind of get them ready for production. So we're not actually creating apps here. We're really just uploading folios into a service. And the previews that you'll get of your content are not the highest resolution previews. That you would do either by doing on-device previewing or desktop-based previewing. So those folios, they can't really be published into anything until you build an app. And so that's what it's called the Viewer Builder Service, or the App Builder Service is the newer name for it. And that is a standalone desktop application, which we're going to see in a little while. And that allows you to build that single or multi-issue or multi-folio viewer app. So what you do is you build that app with all of its specifications, and then you add either your iTunes or Google Play distribution credentials and certificates, or if you have enterprise credentials for distributing your app internally inside of your enterprise, that's where you would add that and then sign with your enterprise signed certificate to be able to distribute your app within your enterprise, kind of behind your firewall. And so that app is created on Adobe's cloud. It's only stored there temporarily because then you would, as the author, would bring that app down and then distribute it internally. So once that app is created to house the folios, then you would actually click the Publish button inside of the Folio Producer service and send the folio or set of folios into the distribution service, which would then deliver those folios into the app. Right? So that distribution service, by the way, just to take one step back here, that is Adobe's worldwide content delivery network, again, which is extremely secure. We'll talk about security in a moment. But continuing on here, so here are those single or multi-folio apps. Now, I have up here an enterprise mobile device management tool is how you would distribute it. You don't have to distribute it behind your firewall. You can distribute it on an iTunes App Store or the Google Play Marketplace or what have you. But using the Enterprise Edition of the Digital Publishing Suite, you can create both enterprise-signed applications and also applications that can go on the public marketplace. So then once you have created those apps and you've housed them where you need to house them, then analytics will get involved. And the Site Catalyst or baseline analytics that Adobe provides as part of the digital publishing suite will look at the usage of your multi-folio or single folio apps and see how folks are using it. So we'll get into that description in just a little while. You might note here that in a multi-issue DPS storefront, you can actually put in login and password that will authenticate against an enterprise user database and then deliver a custom set of folios from our distribution service based on the end user enterprise database credentials. So we'll get in a little more of that in just a second. So like I mentioned at the left-hand side of that graph, this whole process starts inside of InDesign. And in InDesign CS6, which I noticed the majority of you were using, you have the capability of creating alternate layouts. And over here in the Pages panel, you'll see that I have a portrait and a landscape version of every article inside of my InDesign file. And I achieved that by using the new capability in CS6 called liquid layout. So I would design, for example, my cover over here and then apply a bunch of liquid layout rules to each element on the page. So I would lock the left edge and the bottom edge of this title here, but make sure that when the page scales and I create an alternate layout that is horizontal instead of vertical, that those properties would be respected, that it wouldn't scale along with the page, and that it would be pinned to the corners that I'd like it to be pinned to. Whereas the Marine's masthead, as you can see, has a different set of liquid layout rules that govern how it recenters and reshapes. And then the image of the soldier in the background here, that has a separate set of rules determining how the image will resize to fit the page dimension. So definitely worth doing some tutorials on alternate layouts and liquid layouts to make that workflow easier inside of Creative Suite. But once that is completed and you have those two orientations the way that you need them to, you would use the Folio tools, the Folio Overlays panel, which you see here, to create stuff like the image sequences or the slideshows, anything that's interactive to insert the videos. You'd use that Folio Overlays panel in InDesign, and then you'd use the Folio Builder panel over here on the right-hand side to upload your folios to the service. You can actually share. As you see, I'm sharing or have had some of these folios shared with me that I can then either co-author or review right here inside of InDesign. So I would take that folio that I have created in InDesign and upload it to the Folio Builder service just using this panel. And then kind of diving down, by double-clicking, I can see all of the articles that are inside of this one folio. So I've got a few different articles. If I kind of dive down in there, you can see that I've uploaded a portrait and a landscape orientation of this file, of this article into the Digital Publishing Suite Folio Producer service. And that's what we're going to look at right here. And the Folio Producer service is accessible from the DPS Dashboard, which is what you're seeing here. There are actually 4 things available from the DPS Dashboard. Number 1 is the Folio Producer, where all of our folios are going to be assembled and edited. The DPS App Builder, which will allow us to build our app. It'll allow us to see the analytics coming off of the folios that we've created. And it will allow us to manage our users via account administration, so to add new users who can work with the Folio Producer or work with the App Builder or work with InDesign. So we would set up our account administration options there. Down over here on the dashboard is where you would download any updates. Like I mentioned, we're iterating on this every 6 to 8 weeks. And while that schedule is lengthening a little bit to give everybody some more time to adjust to the newest features, here's where you would download them. And in the CS6 application, they actually will update automatically via the Adobe Application Manager. If you have that turned on, I know that a lot of government customers can't allow the Adobe Application Manager. So you'd want to go to this update panel right here and get those. And then, of course, down here in the dashboard is where the learning and other resources are located. So if you need to really understand the guidelines for submitting your apps to the App Store, if you need help or support, or you want to watch some tutorial videos, those are accessible inside of the dashboard. So starting off, from the dashboard, we would go to the Folio Producer right here, and this is just showing a list of all the different folios that I've created. This one right down here is the one that I would have uploaded from InDesign, right, my Marines magazine, as you can see. It's got a title, and we've got some cover previews over here and some metadata about it, and it tells us kind of the default resolution. Now, I don't want to click the Publish button quite yet because I need to kind of double-click or kind of get into this folio to make sure that it's got the appropriate metadata. So I would double-click on there, and then I would get kind of this exploded article view, or this browsing article view, where I could click on it and then each article and enter the metadata. And you can do this inside of InDesign as well, but right here it's kind of a one-stop shop. So I'd enter all that metadata that we saw in our viewer application and any other information that I need. And then over here we've got a little capability of seeing the horizontal as well as the vertical orientations and make sure that those are appropriately associated. We'd close out of there, and now that we're ready to publish our article, we would just click this nice big blue jolly Publish button, and we would go ahead and publish our folio to the specific app that we were looking for. So I'd go ahead and publish it, and I can actually see the progress of my publication. So if this is a publication that people are waiting for, and I want to be able to show, to know exactly when it's going to be ready for my end users to download, I can actually see how that progress is going. And it's actually quite quick. Now, before we actually publish an app, publish a folio, we actually have to have an app that can contain that folio. So that's why the App Builder is here, and that's another one of those services. It's a desktop application. As you can see here, you can create application that is both for iPad and iPhone, or for Android currently. And there will be obviously considerations for different and more platforms such as Windows 8 coming soon. So this is really just a wizard-like interface that takes you through all of the considerations that you need to create your app. So, for example, stuff like the name of the app. Who is the folio producer from whom the folios that populate this app are coming from, right? We need to know who that is, what the ID is. And even though I'm not really applying to a best practice here by using my name, it should really be something a little bit more generic. That's going to tell the app where to get the folios from. And now, kind of moving on, here's where we put in the icons and splash screen graphics. Now, if I happen to have all of those icons and splash screens pre-baked, I can come over into my Finder and grab them and just drag them right over into this interface. And as you see, they automatically populate into the appropriate field. But that's only one part of the process, because we have to create icons and splash screens not only for the iPad 1 and 2, but also for the iPad HD, for the iPhone 3S and below, and also the iPhone 4 and above, right? So we have to do a little bit of homework in creating those graphics. But once we've actually created those graphics and dragged them in, we'll get nice green check marks around all of this stuff, and we'll be ready to move to the next piece, which is creating navigation. Do we want to customize our navigation and customize our storefront the way that Marines Magazine did, or do we just want the default standard storefront? And if so, what are the options that we want to program into that storefront? If we want to enable social sharing so that end users can share specific articles over Facebook and Twitter, here's where we would enable that, and also email sharing and copying links. And if you have a Facebook app ID that you would set up as a Facebook developer, then that's where you would plug that in to be able to share that specific content. Then here's where you would certify your developer and distribution provisioning profiles. Now, of course, you have to be a member of the iOS developer community in order to do this type of thing for Apple. And we have a companion guide that I'm going to show you in a few minutes that, that walks you through that entire process. If you are distributing back behind the firewall an enterprise signed app, here's where you would enter those credentials as well. Once you're ready, you would link up to the default Omniture servers, or the default analytics servers that are going to be keeping track of the analytics coming off of your app. And then here is where you see your app is ready to go. You can download a developer version of your app to test it out on your own local device. And then the distribution app is what you would download and then distribute either across your enterprise or to the iTunes App Store. And after folks start using that app, you'll be able to go into the Analytics tab of the DPS Dashboard and look at how many installs have occurred for each individual app over the span of time. How many downloads of which folio have occurred. So, this folio has a few thousand downloads, and this folio has comparatively fewer downloads, how many errors and canceled downloads. If it is a for-purchase app, you can see when it started and whether or not it actually got purchased. And then you can kind of get a bit of a granular sense for all the different articles inside of your folio, how many times those particular articles have been viewed. If you have stuff marked as ads, you can see how many times those specific ads have been broken out. You can see how many times videos inside of your app have been played. And then you can kind of burrow down into individual overlays. If you've named them appropriately, you can see how those specific overlays, like, for example, that 3D rotating tank. If you named that overlay appropriately, you'd be able to see how many times people actually used it. So we are coming towards the end, and I just wanted to go really quickly through distribution model. So I'm going to save, Bob, if you don't mind, I'm going to save the Q&A towards the Q&A section just so we can get through the resources and content there. So again, if you have constituent-facing publications, you can create a public app that will be distributed through the Apple, Android, or Amazon app marketplaces. But if you want to have an app that is also distributed through the app marketplaces, but that has a restricted level of distribution of different folios, where not everybody gets the same content, and you deliver unique content by the user and create a login, then you can do that as well with the Digital Publishing Suite. And then finally, as I mentioned before, you can create behind the firewall enterprise signed applications that can be privately distributed to those enterprise devices via a mobile device management software, or just by setting up your own distribution. And that's for stuff like employee-only publications. So an example of how that would look, to do that restricted distribution is let's say you've got employee X and employee Y. They download that app from your mobile device management solution, which could just be an Apache server with a LDAP integration to guard whether or not they're allowed to download it. And then they could actually download those apps, but the storefronts that they see are going to be different based on the login that you institute via the restricted distribution API using the Digital Publishing Suite. So Jeff over here would log in, and those credentials would go to his enterprise database, and whether or not those credentials were accepted would then well, first of all, the credentials would be accepted, but then we'd be able to know, well, what type of user is Jeff? What group does he belong to? And once we know that, we can deliver the appropriate folios to his storefront. Now, notice he's got folio A, B, C through I, but now when Carol comes over and logs in, we know that she is part of a different group that is entitled via our integration with the enterprise database to a separate set of folios from the folio distribution service. Now remember, this folio distribution service is part of Adobe's service, but what we can do is integrate that service via the restricted distribution API to the enterprise database of your LDAP or Active Directory, so that whomever Carol and Jeff belong to as groups, the appropriate folios will be served via Adobe's distribution service. But that's just a quick example of restricted distribution. It is possible with DPS, and it's very popular in the corporate world. Now, I don't have time to go through security. I will say that Adobe takes security, data security, content security extremely seriously. And if you are interested to learn more, I want to encourage you to visit our security website and also to download this publication and go through it. And I'll show you where you can do that right here in the resources section. So you will be able to download this entire deck that I have just delivered. When I switch the workplace for our closing polls, it's going to be in the download box, which is down. It's going to be down at the lower left-hand side of your screen. I'll put that up momentarily. But just grab the PDF, and it will have all the information that I went over today. So that's very exciting. Now, I'm plugging Bob Bringhurst's application, DPS Tips app. It's immensely popular, and he also happens to be on the line helping us today, which is awesome. And so go download his app if you want to learn just basic tips and also advanced tips, kind of turn over twice and jump up and down with your fingers crossed type of tips, which are really interesting and fun, and very, very good resource for our DPS users. If you want to get more in-depth to the scope of all of those 4,500 apps, we basically have them cataloged, and you can search through them based on tags, based on region, based on subject matter, but you can really get really granular, and that's at our digital publishing gallery. Again, we have hours and hours of video tutorials for free available at tv.adobe.com around Digital Publishing Suite. Every time there are new features in the product, which is, again, quite rapid, we update Adobe TV with, auto-archiving and new viewer features and new bookmarks, right? So some of those new features are detailed on Adobe TV. So I want to encourage you to keep up with that. We also have a developer center, which has a ton of different documentation, including setting up, an enterprise iOS app distribution for you to take your DPS apps and put them on your corporate network. Stuff around restricted distribution, like I showed before, how to access the restricted distribution APIs of our digital publishing suite, and everything else in between, including this great document, the Adobe iOS Publishing Companion Guide. I'm sure Bob on the phone must have had a lot to do with this, but that's a PDF download. Again, the link is going to be in that PDF that you're going to grab off of our site. Our help documentation is really quite comprehensive, and I want to encourage you to see that. Now, after this webinar today, you will be receiving not only a link to the recording, but also an invitation to attend six free deep dive training sessions on DPS. Those have been hosted by members of the product team and digital publishing evangelists. So these are really great sessions. They go much deeper than I was able to in our brief hour today. I wanted to encourage you to check those out. We also have recently started offering our own on-site custom training, classroom-based training for one day, and there's a link down here to learn more about that on the Digital Publishing Suite. It's at training.adobe.com, so you can check that out. If you're looking for a specific training partner in your area, we have the Partner Finder on training.adobe.com. So this is actually looking at the DC area. As you can see, I'm looking at a couple of trainers who train not only in Digital Publishing Suite, but in all of the Adobe desktop tools. And then finally, I wanted to mention the Adobe DPS Kickstart program, which is a brand new program that Adobe has started to offer. And more information in this is inside of the PDF download that I'm about to bring up. And the Kickstart program is actually professional services that Adobe offers to come in and do custom enablement and also development with you for a particular pilot project. So it's very exciting that we're starting to offer this, this service, the Kickstart service around Digital Publishing Suite. And I want to encourage you to check that, go ahead on the lower left-hand side and pull out these downloads. Now, we are right at the top of the 2 o'clock hour, so for those of you who have to get going, I completely understand. We've had about 115, 120 folks on the phone, so we want to say thanks for attending today. Before I go through the Q&A, I know that our feedback is really valuable and really important to us, so please take a second to answer the 3 questions up at the top of your screen there. And Marissa Cherry, our field marketing manager, had a little note before we get into the Q&A. So Marissa, why don't you go ahead?